everyone, and welcome to the B2B Marketing Bopcast. My name is Caroline Gilbert, and I am Content Marketing Manager at Bop Design. I am actually re-recording my intro to our second podcast, which was with David Oates, President of Stalwart Communications, a PR and marketing firm in San Diego. We originally set out to discuss who should run social media at a company. Is it internally, or is it an agency? Is it a marketing department? Is it a PR department? But as the discussion unfolded, it turned into a broader idea of why social media should be a part of your corporate culture. David made some great points about how obstacles and goals are unique to every business and provided some tips on how evaluating your social media strategy ultimately leads to success. So let's get started, and here's David Oates of Stalwart Communications. David, thank you so much for coming to the podcast today. If you could just explain a little bit about Stalwart and what you guys do and what your scope is.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure. So I started Stalwart Communications just a little over 7 years ago with the intent on really changing the way PR and what I'll call marketing communications agencies operate. And we call it pay on performance. So instead of a retainer, our fee structures are organized very similar to how a salesperson gets compensated. We give unlimited hours for every client engagement. And when client engagement is set in a proposal that we say, here's the business problem, whether it's new sales, leads, new investment partners, new distribution partners, new technical partners, brand elements, whatever the case may be, we outline a series of initiatives that we think will help bring about an awareness and interest from those various audiences, whether that's public relations, whether that's social media, direct marketing, email marketing, event marketing, or points in between. And the bulk of our fees, the overwhelming majority, are tied to specific metrics as to how we are actually delivering upon those results. And those metrics could include positive press coverage in key media outlets, increased web traffic, people coming to an event that are of the audience that we're trying to attract, response to advertisements, email marketing, and point in between. So we're really trying to put our money where our mouth is, as we say, in delivering upon a marketing initiative that actually is going to drive business results. So we're more concerned about the outcomes we're generating instead of the hourly output of, hey, look how many press releases we've written, or things of that nature.
I think that price structure is really interesting and something that you don't hear a lot from agencies.
We don't hear enough of, to be honest with you, particularly from other PR firms that are still very similarly structured to how law firms operate, which for law firms makes a lot of sense. When you're a lawyer, particularly in the corporate transaction world, your job is to mitigate the risks of a business, whether it's because you have good solid contracts that give you mutual indemnification, whether you have good HR policies, whether you have good ways to operate, you're mitigating those risks moving forward. But a marketing and PR agency is designed to increase the awareness and create the buzz. And that has less to do with the amount of time that you invest in it and more to do with the effectiveness of it. I come from a Navy background, and specifically a Navy public affairs background for the latter half of my career. No one cared in the service how many hours I were working, because we were all working 24/7. It was, did we get the mission done? Did we actually do what we said we were going to set out to do in an objective format? And if we met that mission, that's how we gauged our success or our failure. I want public relations and marketing communication agencies to act accordingly because businesses demand it.
So in terms of social media taking that pricing structure and that philosophy, what are some of the success metrics that you apply, that you report back to?
Yeah, the combination of different success metrics with regards to social media. It could be simply the increase of followers and fan base, whether that's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Vine, whatever the appropriate social media platform is, dependent on the audience. But also we like to take it a step further. We view social media as one of the spokes in a hub model, if you will. Well, if you look at an airline analogy where you've got sort of a central hub and then planes fly to different destinations, the goal is to generate the conversations not only on the social media platform, but bring them back to their core website or call to action, whether it's sign up for an event or something like that, where you can engage in sort of one-on-one conversations on your turf, right? Bring them into your office, show them, much like a retail store. You want to bring them into your store, experience all that you have to offer in addition to the product sets. That's how we want to drive social media. So another metric is how many people are actually coming to your website? How many people are inquiring about your products or services? Are they coming to an event that you have going on there? And that's another success point we want to drive through social media. And we think that's important for anybody who's doing that there. The conversations on social media are fantastic, but only if they're going to drive a business result ultimately.
So how do you determine those business results? Is it just opening the communication with your internal contact? And do you find that you're often just at one point of contact with an internal team, or are you breaking the silos down even with other departments of your client's company?
That's a great question. We really will start any conversation with a prospect on the business goals first. We will outline what it is that they're trying to achieve and how they believe marketing is going to be a determinant factor in getting those success metrics. And from there, we'll look at what the platforms are, how best we think we can communicate with the audience for a call to action. And with social media, it will encompass a lot of different people within a company to make that vehicle work, because you'll have operations, you'll have sales, you'll have product, you'll have service areas, and they're all going to have some level of input in a comprehensive strategy that starts a conversation. Companies are not unidimensional. They have a wide range of things that make the company what they are. Even something like Starbucks. It's not just about the coffee, it's about the Starbucks experience. It's about the other products that they have for sale and things of that nature. It's how people actually order, whether it's through the drive-thru, up at the counter, or things like that. So all those type of things are going to play into a good social media strategy. And you have to really break down the barriers, to your point, to make that a reality.
I like that you mentioned a lot of the additional departments that need to be involved. It's also a sales strategy. It's not just communications or marketing. There's also a legal side to it as well. And for some, there's even a human resources element. Have you had experience with some of those departments that you come in and they're more hesitant to the social media tactic because they've seen, it be not as successful from a legal standpoint or an HR standpoint?
Yeah, so your question on the legal and maybe HR standpoint probably has multiple facets to it. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. So let me take it in a couple of ways. There are certain industries that are very much regulating the communication to the audience. You see that in financial institutions primarily, where and particularly investment management funds. They can't just sort of disclose one-off. They've got to be more public. They are regimented in how they communicate. And so some simply shy away from social media because they're concerned of some sort of regulatory body backlash. Get that. But that's few and far between, to be honest with you. And those are ones that you can still develop good communication strategies on social media platform that still fit the regulatory requirements and able you to endear yourself to the audience. But I think another aspect to your question for HR people is, well, if you communicate one-off with an employee, they could feel either discriminated against or that they're being watched outside of their work environment, particularly if you have an employee that maybe vents about a boss on Facebook or something like that. And I get that. The reality is that they're doing that in the course of the day anyway, and it doesn't preclude you from being one that is open to regular communication. Companies have open door policies within the office. I think the discussion on Facebook and so forth is another way to have that open door policy. There are certain things that you can and can't do if a person says something disparagingly about a company publicly. But I do think that there are still ways in which you can have a real good dialogue with the overwhelming majority of your employees who are happy. And sort of puts it in perspective. So just because you may have one or two people that maybe have an issue with their boss, I don't think that should necessarily inhibit a good comprehensive discussion on them. So I think it needs to be put in perspective. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. Do you have you had experiences where you've mobilized good employees in social media who maybe weren't the immediate guests for being involved in that project?
Are you asking me about getting employees to sort of talk well about
Yeah,
their
and getting an
companies?
employee
Yeah.
buy-in and like increasing, the excitement around social media for a company.
Well, I think that happens as a matter of course. This probably gets to the core issue, I think, with any successful marketing plan is if you have a good internal corporate culture. In other words, if your people believe in the company, believe in the management team, find value in what they do, those type of things will happen naturally. They'll endear themselves to wanting to talk about, hey, it's a great company that I work for, or we're doing some really cool things in the office. And you see that as a matter of course with your Facebook friends. Somebody takes a picture of something that happened in the office that's really cool. Everybody's jazzed. There's a party going on, or everybody's celebrating a big win, or things like that. You know good companies when you see it, when employees are taking pictures and talking about how cool that was and things of that nature. What I think companies can do is offer them a vehicle by which they can have a communications in a more concentrated manner. That's with their own Facebook pages. That's with the Twitter feed that they can hashtag, or they can, certainly include in their tweets. It's also on Pinterest when they talk about having a Pinterest page or things of that nature. So I think the way in which companies can, if they have good corporate culture, can help with that is just facilitate the platforms by which they can have those conversations. But I don't necessarily think that encouraging people to use social media on their own will work unless they want to do it themselves. And if you have a good corporate culture, that's going to happen anyway.
Right. In terms of getting involvement, not just injecting a business within people's personal profiles, but having a diverse group of individuals in a company who runs the social media accounts. Hope and I think I see a lot of corporate culture shifting from when at the start of social media where it was, let's give the 20-year-old intern the social media job because they get it and they are using it already. And it's now shifting up and you're starting to see more involvement from directors or VPs or senior VPs or even the CEO of a company who is getting into it because they see the results and they see the value. Would you agree? Would you think that some companies are still behind the curve and, a lot of social media is being run by too entry level of a position?
So I think the larger question is where do they view marketing in general? And there are still some companies, to your point, that view marketing as a cost center. And that probably means that the strategy is wrong. They're not looking at it from a standpoint of how can marketing accelerate demand generation and accelerate the current sales pipeline or investment pipeline or partnerships pipeline. Marketing is never going to take a person who's closing a new round of funding out of business. They're not going to take away a job of a good salesperson, but what they should do is make those two jobs a lot easier and have discussions that close deals much faster. If companies don't view marketing in that vein, anything, including social media, is not going to be something that they're going to spend a lot of time on. They're going to put a lot of experts in to operate that, whether it's an agency environment or internally. So those organizations still exist. But to your point, I think more organizations view the benefit that a comprehensive marketing program has in being able to reach out to prospects, to their core customer base, to their partners in a much more direct and immediate real-time fashion. I mean, there are companies who pay a lot of money to have feedback from their customers in focus groups and surveys that social media can offer you. And also, it allows you to leverage at a very cost-effective manner the ability to sort of advertise and promote new products and services to your base that loves you anyway. So I think a lot of companies are leveraging more seasoned expert marketers in that regard. Sometimes it's internal, which is fine. Sometimes it's agency because they view agencies as being more cost effective because you have this sort of bench team. You have not just one person. You got multiple people on an agent team for about the same cost it may be for an in-house person. And hopefully you have in agencies like ours that are tying their fees to a result, to a success metric. But it all depends. It all depends on how they view marketing first and foremost. The internal versus agency discussion is secondary to, are you looking at marketing and in terms of social media for the ROI that it can provide?
Mm-hmm. I recently came across a Reagan PR study from December of 2013 where it said for internal PR, only 5% of companies found their efforts to be highly satisfying or highly successful. Do you think there needs to be then a discussion to bring in an agency at a certain point, or reevaluate the internal strategy if there's such a disappointment?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what are the issues, how is the strategy being developed, and who's executing it, and what's the rationale behind it. I will tell you that, and you kind of alluded to it beforehand. There are still some companies who may value it, and even if those who do may not have the correct strategy for that. We see that a lot of times there when we go into a company and we say, do you have a social media presence, or we've viewed it and we've done an analysis or an audit from that, and we say, what's your content schedule? What are the things that you're doing on a regular basis to try to endear yourselves to the audience and expand that, and how is that going? And sometimes we get the blank stare, right? Well, we just post on a daily basis. Well, do you retweet? Do you comment? Do you like? Do you ask questions? Do you seek feedback? Those kind of things, and to what frequency do you do so? The other thing too is depending on what they're posting. We go by an 80-20 rule: 80% education, 20% sort of the hard sell, the promotions. If a company does the opposite, which we see oftentimes, where it's almost 80% hard sell, 20% sort of education based, it turns people off, because now you're viewed as in the same way a television ad is viewed or a radio ad is viewed. Sort of, you're not talking to them, you're talking over them. And that usually turns folks off. So whether it's an agency or an internal environment, the strategy needs to be comprehensive and effective. Now, to your point, a lot of companies will look for an agency's expertise, because we do this on a daily basis, to sort of devise a strategy and execute on that strategy that's going to work. So maybe that's a reason to bring in an agency. But again, it comes down to, is the strategy successful more than it is the resources you have. The beautiful thing about social media, let's talk about some of the benefits of it, is particularly in this day and age, I think it has an incredible benefit more to the PR side than, let's say, the advertising or the direct marketing. Not to say that there isn't value on that one there, but the PR landscape is changing in such a fashion that you are seeing less and less opportunities with sort of the traditional media to get your stories across. They're hurting for business, and their ability to sort of expand upon stories that may or may not include organization are inhibited. And in some cases, some media outlets are pure pay for play. The only way you're going to get a good story out of them is if you buy an advertisement. The consumer, the audiences read right through that, and have largely looked upon the traditional media outlets as, well, maybe some value, but not quite the value they were beforehand. Social media allows you to create essentially your own broadcast channel, your own communication dialogue, where you can espouse certain things that you're doing well, and bring in others and talk about what they're doing well, in such a way that like PR of maybe 10, 15 years ago, traditional PR has as much, if not greater, effect to bring people in, interest, dialogue, audience, lead opportunities, and that kind of thing. So I do believe in the value of social media. We use it, and you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we're on LinkedIn, and certainly a lot of other social platforms that we communicate regularly. And I think we're big proponents of that. But I think it has to be one in which you look at it almost in the same way you would look at PR from days of old. It's about endearing yourselves to an audience without selling them.
I love your point about how PR firms nowadays are struggling, because I am seeing a huge overlap between marketing and PR, more so than ever. And I think because of the overarching theme of, whatever buzzword you want to call it, whether it's content marketing or brand journalism, or, another terminology of marketers are now trying to they see the value in content. PR has been doing content for decades, and marketers now see the value in getting that content published. Yep. So marketers are so used to the maybe a little more transactional relationship, and so it's interesting to see how they're taking that to the publishing side of providing the content up front. And they're doing now influencer research and journalism research similar to PR agencies do, of trying to find their audience and all of that. And I like the idea of social media is still the connection between the two, where you can guarantee at least your own voice can be.
Oh, I disagree with you on that one there. I don't think social media is one in which you can ensure that your voice is going to be exactly how you promote it. But let me take a step back. I mean, I see where you're going. The marketers of 15 years ago were one-directional communication. It was largely through an advertising medium or a sponsor at a big trade show event and those kind of things, where you have your say. It is in the language and the vernacular in which you are comfortable with, in which you're comfortable, and then you're broadcasting it to the masses, with the expectation that maybe half of them will be somewhat interested, and then a smaller percentage of that will respond on some level. That dynamic is really gone. Thanks to the availability of technology like social media, we now have the capabilities of having multi-directional conversations with our core audiences, prospects, customers, and partners. That's something that PR has done for quite some time. And now the lines are blurred, because any sort of marketing initiative, whether it's a direct email marketing, whether it's sort of non-traditional advertising, whether it's traditional PR or social media, allows the audience to give the originator real-time feedback. Now, to your point about being able to get your message across, that real-time feedback affects the messaging of an organization. There is a understanding when you engage on something like that, that you're allowing the customer or the audience, the partner or the investor, sort of have a say in how you are perceived. And I think that's a really good thing. It scares a lot of companies to death. But if you endear yourself to an organization that they're giving you feedback and telling you how they would like you to be, how they view your value to them, that's gold, because you can adjust and flex to what is going to actually ultimately drive you revenue. I always talk about that in terms of a baseball vernacular. It's the fan base for like San Diego Padres or Boston Red Sox that are commenting on talk radio, they're blogging about you, they're commenting on Facebook, and they're saying, I want this, I want this, I want this. And some of them are outliers, to be sure, but they're telling the organization why they're so interested and what kind of things they expect from them, because they really like them, or they want to like them, and they want them to meet expectations. And if the organization responds in kind, well, that's just going to draw more people to the ballpark. That's going to draw more people to watch the games on TV, which will draw more advertising, ultimately revenue for the base. But you have to be willing to sort of let yourself out there and be open to the response you're going to get in real time.
I agree about the struggle with the real-time response, and that certainly also goes back to the strategic aspect, that you need to have avenues in place and steps along the way that, well, we're putting ourselves out here. What if it's not responded to as favorably? How do we address that issue? And, everyone goes into it thinking that they're going to be welcomed with open arms. And then if it doesn't, you got to have the strategy in place to handle it.
There's always the outlier who will never be satisfied.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's just part of the deal. That's the nature of any business. I don't care what industry you're in. But I will tell you that if you're getting a real clear systemic negative reaction on social media platforms like Yelp or Facebook or TripAdvisor if you're in the hospitality industry, or the Better Business Bureau, if you're getting negative comments from customers, and it's such the degree that their Better Business Bureau, say, ranks you on a lower scale, you might want to just take a step back and say, what is it that we're not doing right? Because there could be some real valid points that your customers are trying to tell you. Maybe you're not servicing them in the manner with which you've led them to believe you will through your communication efforts to that point. Maybe your product or your quality the quality of your product, rather, needs to be elevated. Something along those lines. And I think that that's ultimately where a company needs to start. What am I doing that I need to do a little bit better? And if you find that there are things you can improve, and you convey that to your customer, those negative reactions that you got all of a sudden turn into positives, because the customer believes they've actually been listened to, and the company's responding because they value them, and they're actually going to work hard to make things better. And customers will love that. Customers will always give a company a second chance if they acknowledge the genuineness and sincerity of their concerns and complaints, to which they've taken the time to express from you. What a better What a better way to do that? Because the time that an organization should be worried is not when there's a negative Yelp review. It's when there's no Yelp reviews.
Mm-hmm. That's an awesome point. Yeah, I think capitalizing on when there's quiet to reinforce your brand promise and to reinforce that you're there for your customers ultimately.
Right.
In terms of bringing it back to just B2B and versus business to consumer, of course they still have customers, but what do you say to a more B2B company that says, oh, well, my customers aren't on social media, it's not really a priority? What is your response?
Two words: LinkedIn. LinkedIn is truly the business to business social media platform. Now, there are, in addition to having your individuals, that are on there that all have their, hey, I'm working for this company X at this point. You should really look at your company page. You should make sure that you've got links appropriate to the website, that you have updated information. There are ways also to port in, if you've got a blog, how you port in your blog to either the founders or the CEOs, the executives, sort of add to their LinkedIn profile or things like that. Business to business transaction and it can start with LinkedIn, and it starts with LinkedIn largely from a research. Now, is a software company who's selling to, let's say, a government agency going to get a lead from LinkedIn? Probably not. But again, if you look at marketing as an accelerant to closing the sales cycle, there is an opportunity for, during the RFP process or even beforehand when you're talking just specs for maybe an upcoming initiative, that whoever is writing that check, who's making the purchase order from the agency standpoint, is going to go search you on Google, going to go search the organization. Things that should come up are LinkedIn. They're going to look at who you're connected with, what people are saying about you and your organization. And they're going to take those seriously because LinkedIn is viewed as almost the business social network. Is it as important to do Twitter, Facebook? Maybe, maybe not. It may help from purely a search engine optimization standpoint and making sure you're ranked on there. So it shouldn't just be automatically discounted. But I would agree that there may be other platforms that aren't social media platforms that aren't viable for business to business. But I would argue the same thing for consumer. I'm not sure that a consumer product targeting a male audience, let's say between the years of 18 and 44, needs to be on Pinterest. Pinterest skews very much toward the female demographic, and there may not be a value in it going on there. But there may be, let's say, on Instagram or Twitter or something else like that. If you're targeting the teens and tweens, Facebook may not be where you want to go, maybe Vine. So you have to look at social media platforms for their individual value and how it integrates well with a comprehensive marketing plan that's going to drive you the increased awareness from a business metric standpoint.
Well, wrapping it back to the overall corporate culture that you need to create to embrace social media, if there are obstacles, how do you suggest overcoming them? Whether it's people, and people's unwillingness to get involved, budgetary obstacles to creating that culture. What are your suggestions for solutions?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Usually it has to start with what's the current pain point, right? What are things that they are frustrated with that they can't do? And typically companies of any size going, I need to get more people to know about us. I need to close more deals. And I need to do it faster. Deals, again, could be potential customers, partners, or investors. You start looking internally as to how much effort it's taking individuals, whether it's on the direct sales side or the investor relations side or the customer service side, to attract and retain good customers or partners, how much time it takes to do explanations or find those individuals or hunt them down or respond in kind that a social media platform, a direct communication link between those individuals could solve, either increasing your productivity, your efficiency, or certainly your closure rates, your conversion rates, particularly when you're talking sales and things like that. So identify what the pain points are, set up your marketing platform in general, of which social media may or may not be a good component of that, and figure out what the business metrics are for that. And maybe this is here, we were talking earlier about the difference between internal and agency. If you're not sure if you have the strategic expertise in-house to do so, maybe you want to talk to an agency that can help you devise a plan. And then you can determine on the execution side whether it's something you want an agency to handle or whether it's something you want maybe an internal person to do, maybe under the tutelage of an agency. But again, the issue of whether it should be an agency or internal is a secondary question to what is it you're looking for marketing to do and social media to do, and how are you going to tie those into a business metric? And I think once you start explaining that to an executive team on a business metric, then I think you've got their ear. And maybe this is my call to action at the end, and I'm passionate about that because, as I had mentioned, we're a performance-based marketing and PR firm. If agencies don't start talking from a business executive standpoint, not just a marketing initiatives or a tactical marketing perspective, if you can't show a value from a end quantifiable bottom line business metric, the conversation becomes very difficult to overcome when you have obstacles in front of you going, well, why am I going to spend this money on that? So it's really the responsibility, I think, of agencies to start thinking less like marketers and more like executive business people.
Great. Well, I think some amazing points were made today in terms of social media, and even if you're just starting out with social media, or even if you think you have a seasoned social media plan, maybe it's time to reevaluate, especially if you're in that other 95% of companies that aren't particularly satisfied with the current outcomes. I'd like to thank David Oates again for coming. We really appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the opportunity.